Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the South American Palm Weevil San Diego County Symposium. My name is Cheryl Reynolds. I'm with the UC Statewide IPM program. Peter Cosina from UC IPM is also with us today, and he'll be helping us with technical issues. So now I would like to introduce Sonia Rios. Sonia is the Area Subtropical Horticultural Advisor with the University of California Cooperative Extension in Riverside and San Diego counties. She is the principal investigator of this project, and she will be moderating today. So I will turn it over to her, and she will give some opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. I just wanted to welcome you all this morning to day 2 of this symposium. I just really wanted to thank the Western IPM group for funding this project of outreach and extension for the South American palm weevil. As you can see, it's a very important topic that needs to be discussed, and according to what Mark Hoddle said yesterday, it's running havoc right now in San Diego County, even more these last few months. So outreach and extension is something that we really need to cover. We need to also protect our date palms that are in San Diego County, as well as in East County of Riverside. And I just wanted to welcome you and thank you. Our grant team consists of several farm advisors, as well as a specialist, Glenn Wright from University of Arizona, Mark Hoddle, UCR specialist, Michael Rethwish is also a farm advisor out in East County, and then Peter Cosina. There are a lot of sponsors, a lot of people were involved in putting these together. I just wanted to have them listed here and thank them for being a part of these webinars that we will be hosting. Hopefully our next meeting will not be a webinar, and it will be in person. So we're looking forward to that. So keep an eye out for maybe January or February, most likely February. We will be having another South American palm weevil symposium, but in person in Riverside County. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Mike Pallett. He is the Vice President of West Coast Arborist, and he will be talking about palm removal. So Mike, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I wanted to briefly show you where I am. I'm actually at Fort Rosecrans Cemetery. I figured I'd just give a quick plug. There's a day of donated services taking place nationwide today. It's called Saluting Branches, and there's companies from all over America donating tree service to military cemeteries in honor of that sacrifice. So I figured I'd present remotely from this location, and multiple companies in San Diego here, just to give that little shout out on what's happening in my background here. I'm gonna probably turn my camera off. I'm gonna share my screen. All right, so factors to consider when removing weevil-killed palm trees. Little background on me. I work for West Coast Arborists. We're a company that maintains public agency trees throughout California and Arizona. We currently service about 300 cities in those 2 states. And this issue is really just in particular a problem in San Diego. Obviously, I think over the course of the last 2 days, you guys have learned that. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump into the presentation here. All right. So here's the overview of what we're gonna be talking about. We're gonna be talking about customer service factors, crew safety factors, disposal factors, and the give a care factor, even though that isn't exactly the words I use there, but all these things play into the reality of dealing with this palm situation. So in discussion of customer service factors, you got to consider your customers' Canary Island day palm. So for those of you doing tree maintenance service. I know there was some arborists on this, on the list of people who are attending this. Thinking about your customers and where their Canary Island date palms are, you got to think about them. And I would definitely think about them knowing about this weevil, because unfortunately, it looks like this weevil isn't going anywhere. So thinking about them, where are they? Where are these palms located? Are they in residential, commercial, or are they on public agency properties? You know, and really, end of the day, when we're talking about at least where the identified, you know, zone of infestation is in San Diego, really anything south of Highway 52 is probably the highest density of issue with this weevil. So knowing where they are they within that area? Are they high value? You know, some Canary Island day palms, you know, are in these riparian areas where they aren't as large of a concern as somebody's, you know, front of their property or along a commercial property where they really, you know, are a landscape feature that is not one that they want to lose. So are they high value? Again, from a customer's perspective, and then are these palms accessible for preventative treatments? Again, the scenario of a riparian area where it's difficult access, you know, you're going to dive down into the weeds to go treat that. Is that something that they want to invest in? You know, those are questions you want to ask from a customer's perspective. So, end of the day, when we do know where those palms are and we know they're in that infested zone, what's the current condition of those palm trees? And that could change minute by minute. I'm watching these Canary Island day palms die at a very rapid pace. We do work for the city of San Diego. They're sending us removals of Canary Island day palms weekly. I'd say we're removing on average, it's 8 to 20 Canary Island day palms that are city owned in the city of San Diego on a weekly basis. So these things are dynamic, they're changing. You may have looked at the condition of the day palm a week ago and literally it could be different. So knowing the current condition would be a big critical piece to, you know, servicing your customers to make sure that, you know, it's not too late. When you do see it, when you want to, you should really communicate. If they have these Canary Island day palms, you really need to communicate this issue because it's relevant, it's real, it's happening, it's local. You know, communicating with your customers, set up traps to monitor activity. I will caution you, just make sure you don't set those traps anywhere near palms that you desire to keep. Those pheromones are very powerful and really will draw in this weevil to locations that you may not otherwise want it to be. So just caution in that. But it is good to know if there is activity in your region or near those palms, but just a little bit of caution in how close you set those traps up. Recommend a photo document inventory assessment, you know, really capturing that picture in time. What do the trees look like now? Documenting that, making an inventory and seeing where, you know, where things are is a good way to be proactive. Using a boom or ladder to climb up and evaluate the crowns. Just because it might look healthy from the ground doesn't necessarily mean there's not weevil activity up above. So getting up there and really assessing best you can is good. Looking for these signs, deformed crowns, cocoons, larvae, and then recording that date of inspection. This is the date we were there. This is the date we took those photos. This was the condition. It's important to do that. And then obviously if the palm tree is infested versus uninfested, then there's going to be different strategies for that. So if a palm tree is uninfested, congratulations. End of the day, you are now gonna, if you want to preserve that palm, you're gonna have chemical treat it. And that's just the reality. Really, to keep this bug away, there's lots of chemical cocktails. I know Rainbow, I was on a call yesterday. Rainbow's working on some different techniques for this, but either way you look at it, to make these trees survive this issue, you're going to have to introduce chemicals to fend off and secure your trees. And really the frequency of those chemicals is pretty high. I remember it was like 3 times a year. Now they're saying 4 times a year. So it's an investment. It truly is going to be an investment to preserve these trees with this weevil, you know, flying around. If the tree is infested, remove it and cut it down for safety, cut it down for reduced, you know, multiplication of the weevil. So when you're going to perform that work, there's definitely some things you want to consider from a crew safety perspective. You know, so it's different than dealing with removal. There's lots of uncertainty that comes with a heavily infested Canary Island date palm. So when you're evaluating, is the decline to a position where it's unstable? A lot of the reasons why the cities want these trees removed as quickly as possible is because those heads can become destabilized. And depending on what's below them, there can be a lot of targets of high value, including people, that could be put at risk. So understand the rapid nature in which you might need to respond to these, understand the potential destabilization that can occur in the process of removing these. When you're evaluating, are they accessible by aerial lift versus climbing? Climbing a palm tree that has a destabilized head, that's a pretty scary predicament for a climber. I don't care how experienced you are, that's still an uncertainty that, as a person in my position, I don't feel comfortable asking staff to do that. If I can't ask them to do something that's safe, then I don't want them doing it. So obviously unstable heads, accessibility is a big deal. You can get a crane out there to take the head off. Do you need, what do you need to be able to access that for your safety of your employees? Are there targets below that could be impacted by the removal operation? So the picture on the bottom right here, there's a fence there. So if I just drop that head, am I going to damage that fence? We have to do some type of rigging. Understanding what it's going to take to do the job safely is super important. Depending on the degree of infestation, the crown can definitely be even more heavily unstable. Really what you're looking at is almost as those weevils are feeding, they're essentially creating a mush bowl, if you will, on the inner heart of that palm, which can really be something that from a normal cutting through a palm tree with a chainsaw feel, you're cutting into potentially soup because it's so chewed up and mushed up inside there that stability is definitely questionable. So setting taglines, and what I mean by taglines, you set ropes around the head to help control the fall because that debris can fall apart in the process of you cutting. So being prepared for that, setting those taglines, creating a very large landing zone for the debris, and understand that, again, a destabilized head has a good potential to splat and spread the debris even further than traditional. So know that. Definitely communicating, and this is a little 101 on felling operations for tree care, but communicating your plan to all crew members before you start cutting. And you don't wait till the tree's in the middle of the ground before you start yelling to get everybody out of the way. So super important step, make sure all crew members are safe before the cutting operation takes place. Try to control the debris. Obviously, like I said, it's going to be a little messy as these things fall. You're looking at not only the mess of palm fronds and debris, but really the weevils themselves and these cocoons, which I'm sure you've all learned about and seen yourselves. But the goal is to try and control that debris as best you can. We don't want to proliferate more weevil flights. So if there's an opportunity to grab these weevils, grab these cocoons, grab the larva, we want to go ahead and do that. Try to control it. The cocoons, try and keep track of that stuff, the larva, the juvenile pupa, even the mature bugs. And really, end of the day, we encourage the foot dance. We're going to stomp them, try and kill them. I don't want guys taking them for souvenirs. The only reason we would try and preserve them is if, Mark Hoddle's calling me up saying, hey, I'd like to grab some more of them. But for the most part, we want to try and control that debris, kill the weevils, kill the larvae, harvest the cocoons, and just be thorough in that piece of the process, which does take extra time. This is not, again, a normal operation. We're doing a part of trying to, reduce the spread of this bug in our removal operations, which is not normal. So when you're thinking about, doing this type of work, you do need to understand that it is going to take extra time, budgeting for it when you're putting your quotes in for doing these palm trees. Just understand that. Ideally, if you could chip the debris, that'll definitely ensure you kill all the larvae. As it goes to the chipper, you're going to be cutting things up and slicing and dicing them through the chipper. If you're transporting, ideally, you're going to a southern region landfill in San Diego County and not taking it north. So covering the debris with tarps is a good idea in that transport, just to avoid any spreading if possible. And again, just focusing it on areas that are already infested, which is those southern regions of the county. So what does that all mean? End of the day, we're all have a stake in caring about these trees. It's that give a care factor. You want to consider it. And we all have our eyes in the field, and really communicating will definitely help eradicate this pest. I know Mark's got a good website there for registering when you see these trees that are infested, and it's a lot. I'll be honest with you. I almost need a full-time dedicated staff in order to really enter all of the ones we're seeing, at least south of the 52 freeway. But communication's critical. Report when you find an infested tree, help track that movement, set those traps. Again, I caution those traps in areas that you don't want to see the weevil. Try and set them in places that you'd like to know if they're anywhere near. Maybe I'd even say within a half mile or a mile away from the trees you're trying to preserve. And then contribute to research, again, registering these findings on the website, communicating with Mark Hoddle and other folks that are on this panel and in this group, and spread the word about this bug. Get it out there, let people know what's happening, and that'll help. I know that thank you guys for getting a grant to do some research on this. I feel like that it's an uphill climb because this bug is just so strong and such a strong flyer and has such a veracity for these Canary Island day palms and a few other species, which I'm sure you may have heard of already as well. But just a scary bug that really it's going to take a lot of effort to do anything in the big picture to try to stop it. So, end of the day, my message is let's not let these Canary Island day palms go extinct in Southern California. And let's all do our part to try and preserve them and guard against the South American palm weevil. So that pretty much concludes my presentation. I'm open to any questions or if you want to put them in the chat there.
I don't see any questions at the moment. I think you're good to go. Thank you so much, Mike, for that. And
yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to get to our next speaker, Allison Harrell. She is a harbor ecologist. I've never heard of that.
It's a made-up word. I'll explain it in a second.
Okay, I was like, oh, that's new to me. Okay. She is with Rainbow Tree Care Scientific Advancements. She will be giving us a research update in scientific advancements of monitoring, scouting, and treatment of the South American palm weevil. It's all yours.
Thanks, Sonia, for the introduction. I'll spend just a moment introducing myself in a second. But as Sonia mentioned, my name is Allison Harrell. I'm here to give a research update on treatments for South American palm weevil. So just quickly, outcome and agenda, and actually, let me look at the time really quick. Okay, sorry, just want to make sure I'm on track for time. So who am I? Who is Rainbow? Overview of the toolbox options for South American palm weevil, an overview of the phases of the research projects that we have going on and kind of what the current recommendations are telling us, and then the future of South American palm weevil management. So who am I? Like Sonia said, my name is Allison Harrell. I work for Rainbow Tree Care Scientific Advancements. I am an arborologist. This is a made up internal word, but I am a certified arborist, a pesticide applicator, and I focus on research and development as well as training. So we kind of try to bring all of these things together. I have a degree in biology, a master's in urban forestry. So I've been focused on invasive pests for quite a long time. I have been in the arboriculture industry for about 10 years, started on the ground as a groundsman, tree climber, then made my way into sales. And then now I'm more on this sort of like research and training side. So it's been a fun ride. Oh, and I thought I had moved these. I apologize. Oh, hang on. Sorry. All right, thank you. Who is Rainbow? So we are a tree care company based in Minneapolis, but we also have this other team, the scientific advancements team, eco-science team is what we're changing over to. We are located all over the country. So I'm up in Oregon, but I have counterparts in Southern California. My counterpart, Brian Bruce, who's actually running Saluting Branches where Mike is right now, which is why I am here doing the presentation, though I am heavily involved as well. But we're kind of all over, and we are here. We bring plant health care protocols and research to the industry so we can give you guys predictable results for all of your clients and all of your properties that you manage to keep our urban canopy happy and healthy. We do so in 2020, we did over 135 research trials. I think we're going to be at close to 200 for 2021. We partner with leading industry folks, university scientists. We conduct experiments throughout labs, nurseries, and in real world growing conditions. Quick plug for us, if you guys have any research sites you want to be involved in the research, please let us know. We would love to work with you. So we're always looking for advancing our industry. So let us know if you're running into any other pest issues that you need solutions for. Those are some of our partners. And I will thank our current partners in the next slide. I did want to give ourselves, I apologize, this is not a Rainbow commercial, but I did want to let you know, we have a plant healthcare workshop coming up in California. We've got the week of the October 4th, one in Escondido, one in Long Beach, and one in San Leandro. So 2 down in SoCal and 1 down in NorCal. We're going to have industry professionals coming to speak, University of California, Davis, University of California, Riverside, talking about more South American palm weevil stuff. But just, I saw that we had a lot of arborists on here, so this is kind of a perfect opportunity. There will be ISA credits and pest credits. So I know these are hard to come by. This is the main reason I'm presenting this to you. You can sign up, treecarescience.com/events. I recognize that is not why I'm here, but I just wanted to let you know because it'll be cool. So back to our actual South American palm weevil stuff. I just want to thank our collaborators on the South American palm weevil research that we have going on. Ricardo Aguilar at Aguilar Plant Healthcare or Plant Care, who you heard from yesterday, as well as Dr. Mark Hoddle and Dr. Ivan Milosevic, both at UC Riverside, have been pinnacle important people for the research here. And then also thank you to our sites, Balboa Park, Bonita Golf Course, and Glen Abbey, as well as quite a few other homeowners associations and other areas that have palm trees. So I'm going to go over kind of the application methods and the toolbox approach. So I'm sure you guys all know this, but I just like to back everything up. Integrated pest management means using your toolbox approach. So making sure we are diagnosing problems properly, reviewing the cultural and chemical control options that are available to us, and then determining the best application techniques given the past pathogen and site and tolerance for your clients that manage those sites. So maybe that's you, or maybe that's the homeowner. So first, and I'm just going to show you what these are because I'm going to be talking about them as management strategies. The soil drench or soil injection, you can inject product right into the soil around the base of the tree, as you can see in the photo here. You can also dig a trench around the base of the tree and pour product around the root flares. That way you kind of make a little moat and then cover that back up. The second would be a bark spray. So this could be used for some of our products. One of them being Dinotefuran is really great to apply like this. Basically, you have your backpack sprayer and you just kind of spray the trunk of the tree from 6 feet down, and you coat the entire base of the tree, and that gets absorbed through the lenticels in the bark, as well as some that runs into the ground, gets taken up. So that is certainly an option that we use, or we've been studying at least. And then crown drench and foliar application. So this is a photo that we took when we were doing these applications. Obviously, it's a little bit not ideal. I will talk about kind of the pros and cons of these things as we move forward. But basically, basal drench, soil drench, those are really quick and easy. Crown drench foliar application, a potential for quite a lot of drift. So we definitely need to be mindful of that. That being said, this has been one of the options that has been working. So it really just depends on how serious you are about controlling some of the issues that you're dealing with. But basically, Ricardo was taking a bucket truck and drenching right into the crown, or if the trees were small enough and you had enough power, you could spray directly into the canopy of that tree. And then last but not least would be trunk injection. So as we know with palms, it's not ideal to come in and trunk inject just because they don't compartmentalize. You know, they're basically just a big grass, not actually a tree. So they become really susceptible to rot when we drill into the base of the tree. That being said, if you're between losing a tree to South American palm weevil, which is inevitable, or drilling one hole into the base of the tree, if that has the potential to save it, you're probably going to opt for it. So Arsen is coming through with data on efficacy, bark spray for palm trees. And I will talk about this in a moment, but basically that's one of our protocols, and we haven't really seen results with it. Okay, so we're going to talk about the industry standard. You heard from Dr. Mark Cottle yesterday, who I'm pretty sure talked about all of this. Basically, trapping and monitoring, removing and destroying infested palm material, maintaining your palm health. A lot of palm health has to do with soil nutrition. Obviously, a healthy tree is not protected against an invasive beetle that attacks healthy trees. However, with a lot of insects and pathogens that come in, a lot of times it has to do with the overall health of the tree, overall vitality of the tree. And then avoid wounding palms in high risk areas because as we just heard, weevils are attracted to the moist tissue. So making sure you guys are being mindful of your pruning schedules. And then also this comes into play with trunk injection. And then how that relates is you prune in your quote unquote winter and treat the area with a foliar spray of dinotefuran and imidacloprid right away. That's kind of what's being recommended. And I recognize that people in SoCal don't have a true winter, but there are, we do get that tiny part of winter time where things do go into senescence a little bit, and populations of insects are typically lower. So that's kind of why we make that recommendation. And then the other industry recommendation right now are crown spraying, basal bark sprays, and soil applications of systemics. So again, I'll talk about this, what we've seen with our treatment options. Okay, so I think Ricardo explained this yesterday in his presentation, but basically we do have a few things that are working with variable efficacies. So this was a great little flyer that went out by the University of California Agriculture and Natural Resource Cooperative Extension. So just a quick look at kind of all the options, which I did just kind of highlight. All right, so industry standard concerns right now, and I already hit on some of this, but when you're talking about doing those foliar applications, you either need a spray rig or some sort of equipment or a bucket truck that can then you can spray into the tree using an additional, maybe it's a backpack spray or something like that. So certainly pretty equipment heavy. Obviously, the drift concerns and negative public perception of foliar sprays is something that we deal with heavily. And it makes sense even if you've only got a couple mile/hour winds, if you're dealing with drift that goes a couple of miles away, that is a concern. And then certainly because some of the products that we are using are neonicotinoids, which goes into our next point here. And as we know, a lot of concerns around neonics and pollinators, so we need to be very, very, very mindful of what we are using and where the products are going. And then ordinance difficulties. So some ordinances, like what we dealt with for some of our research projects in San Diego, did not permit foliar applications. So you may run into this on different park or homeowner associations, things like that. So certainly being aware to work around any ordinances. We don't want to be violating any of those. And then of course, limited research. This has only been around for a couple of years, so we really only have a couple of years of research. We have some promising things coming through, and obviously we're continuing to work further, but hopefully we all know by now, science is fluid. We learn things and then we retest them and then we get better at them. So I'm going to talk about that now. So research phase 1, this went on from 2018 to 2020. The overview of the trial that we've been conducting over the last couple of years. So this was implemented at 2 different locations in Bonita, so Bonita Golf Course and Glen Abbey Memorial. We began applications in spring of 2018. We had 7 treatments with multiple intervals. So the 7 treatments that were evaluated in this trial were basically dinotefuran and imidacloprid, an experimental product we call it RTSA 721, and then emamectin benzoate 4%. And we did soil, bark, foliar, and trunk. So I guess trunk and bark are the same. And then different intervals. We did a 3-month interval, a 6-month interval, and an annual interval. And then we evaluated monthly for canopy loss. And this is just kind of relative location of the 2 sites where the study is being conducted. They're only a couple miles apart. And why this is important is because you can see evidence of Canary Island date palm death all around these 2 areas. So, you know, it's important as we design studies to know how the pressure is. And we knew that the pressure was very high here. So Bonita Golf Course, great excuse to go golfing if you want to understand how the palm weevil is impacting areas. And then Glen Abbey Memorial right down the road. If you visit this location, I think most of these are removed at this point, but a couple years ago, this was basically just riddled, well, last year, just riddled with dead palm trees around the property. So the pest pressure is pretty ideal for a trial. All right. So the goal of the phase 1 trial was to determine a toolbox approach management for the pest by studying a variety of chemistries. One of the reasons for implementing the toolbox approach is because chemicals have different uptake times. And I think I have that in the next slide. But basically, like imidacloprid takes a long time to get into the tree, but has a longer residual. Dinotefuran gets into the tree really quickly, but has a shorter residual. And then like a trunk injected obviously goes in very quickly. So we want to be mindful of those uptake times and those residuals. And then rates. As we've worked with these products over decades and decades on different palms, we know that different pests, some require higher rates to be used, some require lower rates to be used. We're really trying to hone that in. We don't want to use more chemical than we have to, but also being mindful that we would potentially need to apply for a special EPA permit to increase the rates. We're dealing with that on the East Coast with spotted lanternfly. We found that they only respond to a really high rate of a specific chemistry, so we had to apply for specific permits to get that added to the label. Also mode of action. Certain chemicals have broader range of insects that they'll control, but we want to, make sure that we are targeting and reducing the cross species effect to limit the effect to off-target individuals. Obviously application methods, mainly because we just want options available for people. And then of course our goal is to find predictable results. All right, so this is just kind of a photo of what things looked like. And this photo was taken in January of 2019, so about 6 months into the trial. And as you can see, we actually had some decent results using all 3 of these. These are 3 different application methods and products. And we saw good, so 2 soil, 1 trunk, 1 was a combo product, so imidacloprid dinotefuran, 1 was an experimental, and 1 was emamectin benzoate. So we did see some decent results, but only time will tell how things will go. It allowed us to refine some things and make some changes. So here are the results. Basically, sorry, I'm like looking at my screen a little bit closer. Basically, we did see some results were better than others, so we still have a lot of work to do, which is why we brought into research phase 2 to continue determining a toolbox approach, uptake time, residual. Obviously want to continue trials for another year, add new sites, add new chemistries, and then refine the rates and intervals. So phase 1 gave us a better idea of kind of what was working and what wasn't working, so we could shift our focus to what was working, because what's the point of continuing with stuff that isn't working? So we did 6 treatments on this one, and that was a combo of the RTSA 721, the dinotefuran plus imidacloprid, the dinotefuran, and the emmenctin benzoate 4%. And again, so that was 4 different chemistries, and then a mixture of soil versus tank sprays, and then again evaluated quarterly for canopy loss. The phase 2 happened in Balboa Park. You guys all know Balboa Park. It's such a quintessential part of your community. Applications began in February of 2020. Like I said, 6 treatments, multiple intervals, quarterly evaluations. You guys know where it is, in the heart of San Diego. Okay, so Balboa Park and City of San Diego did not permit foliar applications. So we focused on soil and trunk injection. And this is what I mean when you're talking about being in line with the ordinances or the rules that your clients have set for you. We did change in rating data every 3 months in correspondence with treatments. Originally, I think the very first, and I guess it wasn't included in here, the very first round of data that we took, we did a monthly evaluation, and we just found that that was unnecessary labor. Promising preliminary results with experimental use soil application as well as trunk injection so far with this. But we are, I'd say we're about 1 year away from data at this point, so we're not deviating from the current recommendations. But are hopeful to have some more tools to offer you in the next year. Good for Arizona. I think I used this slide for my Arizona talk, but also good for California too. I will say too, I just met with our researcher earlier this week. We are taking samples and trying to see how much product is ending up in the canopy of these trees using these different types of treatments. So we're getting there. We're going to have more results this year, this week. And then, I don't know if that will change anything. We are chugging along and hoping to have a few more options available. And this is, I'll talk about why. South American palm weevil management specifics. All right, so far we are having good results with dual applications of imidacloprid and dinotefuran. So first application, a dual of, so a drench, a foliar drench or spray of imidacloprid and dinotefuran. And then we are repeating that every 3 months, both of those products as a soil application. I just put our 2 products that we've been using for these research, Zytec, Transtek, imidacloprid, Zytec, Transtek, dinotefuran, just in case I refer to them as such. Try to use chemical names, but not always 100% of the time. Just be mindful of your pounds per acreage limits. If you're dealing with a lot of palms on one property, you may be out of luck using these products, or you may have to pick and choose. So please let us, Mark Cottle is happy to help you. I'm happy to help you. Brian Bruce, the territory manager for you, is happy to help you walk through these things. Ricardo, I'm sure, is happy as well to answer any questions. And the future of South American palm weevil management really is focused on finding predictable results, expanding our reliable toolbox options. We really hope to add a trunk injection option. Like I said, we have been getting some results, and we actually were able to go the first round of trunk injections that we were doing. I think we were doing 1 on each quarter of the tree, so 4 holes, which, as we all know, can yield to rot situations. We were doing a singular injection, and then obviously, because of the way palms are, you can continue to reuse that hole, which is great. So we're looking at that. We also were figuring out kind of covering those holes. I know they were using little silicone, kind of like plugging it up like a little caulking tube that you would use for your house. So we're working on that, trying to figure out what's the best option for that. And, there may be other researchers on here who are more palm specific who can speak to that. And then obviously we want to identify non-neonic treatment. So the main reason that we are testing the RTSA 721 as well as the trunk injection is because those are both non-neonic options. Right now, we really are only seeing results with imidacloprid and dinotefuran, and those are both neonicotinoid treatments. So because of pollinator issues, because of acreage limits, we really are trying to find something that will work that's not. And then we also would like to identify longer residual products, because doing an application every 3 months is it's a lot of chemical and it's a lot of labor. So we kind of need to be mindful of that. And really with that, this is my information. Brian Bruce, who's not on here on the call, but he's been, our major collaborator and is local in your SoCal area. Our information is on here if you need anything and you want to reach out. But from here, I will take questions.
Yes, there are a few questions for you. In regards to the research trials of systemic chemical treatments in the real world growing conditions, is it available to the public on website or certain source?
Okay, so this is the research that Rainbow is actively working on with Dr. Hoddle and Dr. Milosevic at UC Riverside. I do not believe that we have anything publicly open because it's not published yet, but we may be able to send you some of the preliminary data, just knowing that you guys are also involved in the research.
Okay. As soon as I get his info, I'll send that to you.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. And then the next question is any data on the efficacy of bark spray for palm trees, especially the ones with such thick outer bark?
Okay, so let me go back to the slide. We saw, it's not to say that it's none, it's just to say it hasn't become the recommendation because you can see here that middle section, so where it says Transtect bark, that's the only bark spray that's available to us. And you can see the visual score was relatively low. So it hasn't become the norm yet. And then RTSA 721 as a bark spray did show some good results, which we are working on, but because that is not a registered chemical, that's a novel being research product that's not on the market yet. That's not something that we can recommend at this point, but we're hopeful that RTSA 721 is something that we would be able to bring to market if we see good results in the next year or two. So we'll keep you posted, keep your eyeballs out.
Okay, thank you. The next one is, can you show the phase 1 results table again, which you're on right now?
Yep, so I'm on right now. If you have any questions on that specifically, let me know.
Okay, next question. Have you looked at fungal pathogens such as Botanigard?
I don't know. I'm not familiar what Botanigard is. So Ron, if you want to elaborate, let me know. But no.
Okay, next question. How do you mitigate to prevent collateral damage to beneficial insects when frequent applications have the probability of non-target species contact?
Yeah, Thomas, this is a great question. So the main reason that the current recommendation stands, so first application as a foliar, second, third, and fourth application of the year as a soil, is partially because of this. Doing a soil application heavily mitigates for non-target species because you're not spraying it all over. What I will say for your first spray, as we noted, if you do like a winter prune and then do your first application as a, what do you call it? A spray into the canopy, a foliar spray. What you can do to mitigate is basically do that spray when you're up in your bucket truck. So you're not spraying as far, right? Like the picture that I showed where it's like a huge chute of product, that's going to have way more drift than if you're able to get closer. So that would be one way. And then if you do have to spray, making sure it's not on windy days, so as still as possible so you're not getting drift. Just the normal things that you would do to mitigate. Unfortunately, it's not perfect, and it is definitely difficult, which is part of the reason this is such a beast of a pest and why so many people are talking about it.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Can you please put up the info on registered for the seminar in Bay Area?
Yeah, so it's this. It's treecarescience.com/events, and this little thing will pop up that says California Tree and Plant Care Workshops. And you can just hit register for San Leandro. Amy, looking forward to seeing you.
Okay. The last question is the follow-up from Ron.
Oh, yes. Okay. So thanks, Ron. Thanks for the clarification. No, so we have not looked at this. I have not looked at this. I'm not sure if Dr. Milosevic or Dr. Hoddle or any of the other university researchers have looked into this at this point. I'm sure there are some people who are. I personally have not, because Rainbow is essentially a chemical distribution company. We mostly look for what we have accessibility to, which are the products that we already make and carry and products that we're working with, because that's more our realm of the world. That being said, we certainly advocate always for the toolbox approach, if that means some sort of biocontrol. We love our clients that are able to use biocontrol. We've certainly worked with plenty of researchers that do use biocontrol kind of in conjunction with us, but I do not have any expertise on this, though I have read a little bit on it. So it sounds like some people are working on it, but it's not me.
Okay. And then what you were speaking of was a fungus that eats.
Yeah, so Bavaria bassiana is a fungus that eats insects. And I think it's been worked on with some other pests out there. But again, I do not know anything about that here. That is well outside of my area of expertise.
Okay, Allison, I think that wraps up our questions. Let me double check, make sure no one did it in the chat box.
Yeah, so we just got one in. Any research on alternative control materials that are not in the class 4 neonics for rotation of chemical? Yes. So the trunk injection, emamectin benzoate 4% is not a neonic, is not a class 4 neonic. RTSA 721 is not a class 4 neonic. And so those are what we are heavily trying to research right now. I do not want to be putting dinotefuran and imidacloprid out in such capacities if we do not have to. We are certainly hopeful that we'll have a non-neonic option into our rotation of chemicals. And like I said, we are focused on finding either a trunk injection or a soil or bark applied. So we are eliminating spraying unnecessarily, eliminating drift, and also not utilizing class 4 neonics. So I appreciate our concern for this, and please know that this is heavily on our minds as we get into this.
Okay, I think that concludes all of our questions. Thank you so much for that presentation, Allison.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. And the quiz questions is different this time, right? It comes at the end.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
perfect.
we'll be having them at the very end.
Okay.
So there's your contact information.
Really quickly, there was just a question in the chat. So it says you mentioned another upcoming meeting. So I don't know if is that the one for tree care science?
Yeah, so this is separate from this entity. This is run by Rainbow specifically, but we're working in conjunction with the University of California, Riverside, and Davis. So that is the upcoming event. That's the week of October 4th. Peter kindly put the registration link in there. I just think it's a great opportunity for you guys to get a little bit more on the pest updates. And then that seminar, I think we'll have 6 ISA and pesticide CEUs for that seminar. So it's certainly a good opportunity to rack those up. It's basically like an 8 to 1 p.m. event. So maybe five CEUs. But yeah, you
Okay.
can reach out to me. I can get specifically, I have to talk to our marketing team and find out how many there are, but we'd love to have you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
Much. Have a good day, Allison.
Thanks, you too.
So, our next speaker will be Dr. Bodell Cass. She is with the County of San Diego Department of Agriculture, Weights and Measures, and she will be giving us an overview of the South American palm weevil status in San Diego County. Bodell, it's all yours.
Great, thank you, and good morning. So you can hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, and let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, that works. You can see the full screen and just that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. As Sonia said, I'm Bodell Cass. I'm an agricultural scientist in the San Diego County Department of Agriculture, Weights and Measures. I'm fairly new in this role. I just started in January. I replaced Tracy Ellis. I know some of you had worked with her before. She retired last year. So I run the county entomology lab and oversee the beekeeping apiary program. So this is my contact information, my email addresses, the lab phone number, my cell number, and this is our lab website. Our front desks are open now for walk-in customers, and I'm at the Kearney Mesa location on Mondays and Fridays usually, and the San Marcos location of the County Ag Department on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday each week. And let me just see if I can, just trying to fix my screen. Okay. So this morning, I just wanted to talk about sort of the general role of the county entomology lab in the South American palm weevil response and some recent updates of what we've been seeing and hearing. So starting with just an overview of sort of the main role of the county lab dealing with regulatory samples. And then related to South American palm weevil, our processing of industry and invasive species samples, our lab hotline and email and Dropbox submission procedures, and some future opportunities we're hoping that will come about to help deal with the South American palm weevil issue, and bee checks as they relate to South American palm weevil pesticide applications. So in general, the role of the county entomology lab, what we're dealing with are mostly regulatory agricultural samples. So samples that are collected by our inspectors. We also do, and that this sort of takes most of our time. We also do insect identification and sort of answer questions for agricultural industry. So this includes arborists and landscapers, people dealing with the South American palm weevil in landscape plants. We are on the lookout for suspect invasive species. So anyone in the county who thinks they found something that maybe shouldn't be here, especially if it's something potentially damaging to an agricultural product, then that gets processed through us and often sent to the state labs. We do education and outreach and the beekeeping or apiary program. So the lab is under the Agricultural Commissioner, and we're the local enforcement of the California State Food and Agriculture Code and the county ordinances. So we're under the direction of the California Department of Food and Agriculture and the Department of Pesticide Regulations and the County Board of Supervisors. So our primary purpose is to protect the agricultural industry, the environment, and the safety of residents. Agriculture is a major industry in San Diego. It's really diverse. Agricultural products, mostly the nursery and cut flower and fruit trees are our major industries. And because it's such a diverse environment, we do, so it's sort of an amazing place for entomology because there's so many different insects and insect pests that come through. So our job is to try and prevent pest invasions and pest exports on San Diego's agricultural products. So the department has a lot of programs. We inspect incoming and outgoing nursery stock. We have detector dog teams. This is my favorite part of the department. The dogs go in and detect fruit and plant material in shipping facilities, parcel facilities. We do annual nursery inspections for pests, and then we have a number of specialty pest detection programs, like for fruit flies, that like every square mile of the county is being monitored for these pests that would be especially damaging. So if pests or diseases are there, it's our job to find them. And the lab's role, like all of these samples get funneled to the lab, and we have to quickly identify what the species are. And the identification is how we work out the correct action. So any pests that are potentially damaging are prevented from entering the county. Anything that other places don't want that we have here, they're prevented from leaving on export stock. So that's sort of most of our samples, and most of our time are on these regulatory samples. And so this is just sort of what that looks like. We get lots of samples of mostly plants and a lot of fruit that we're looking for bugs and working out what they are. Another role of the lab, which is related to the South American palm weevil, is insect identification for industry samples and suspect invasive pests. So if you think you've found something, or maybe you think you found something that's a South American palm weevil, you're not sure, you can submit that to us at our front desk or in our drop boxes. We have a drop box outside both of our locations. It's really great if you can email us to give us a heads up that we're expecting a sample. Often if you send us a photograph, we can identify it from a photograph. Our lab's email only accepts 1 or 2 photos per email, and it won't tell you that the email hasn't come through. You won't get an error message. So if you're sending a photo, just 1 or 2 per email. There's a form called the Specimen for Determination form that you can fill out. We're hoping to update this soon, but it's available at the front desk and on our website. If you can fill out as much information related to your sample, like what the question is you have about it. If it's from a host plant, that's really helpful to know what the host plant was, how you want the information, like the determination returned to you, and allow 10 to 14 business days. We're just a few staff members. And if you don't hear back from us, please follow up. We receive a lot of samples, so don't feel shy to check in how it's going with our processing. So in terms of South American palm weevil reports and submissions to the lab's hotline and email and drop boxes, we get at least 1 submission per week related to this pest. After honeybees, it's the hottest topic that we receive inquiries about. So we help identify the weevils based on the photographs or symptoms of the palms or the physical specimens. And from there, we help direct the customers to the correct place to have the issue addressed. So if it's on county property, how we report that. If it's city property, for each city, the best way to get the tree or the palm looked at. And then private property, we redirect to the Professional Tree Care Association, so that the resident can be in contact with a licensed or certified arborist who knows the correct way to deal with this weevil. As we heard in the earlier talks, it's sort of a pretty specialized, different approach to a lot of the other issues. So we try to talk through, like, make sure that if you've got a dead tree, that it's being chipped small, or that the weevils are being that we're not releasing weevils out into the environment. So sort of help the caller work through how to, the next steps. We always ask everyone to report the location of an infested tree to UC Riverside, the mapping project, or we'll do it for them with their information. And this will be really helpful for the sort of future options we're looking at to help deal with this pest. We're really hopeful with the specialty crop block grant that Mark Hoddle talked about yesterday to test the area-wide control method, attract and kill, which will hopefully be successful. So we're really hopeful about that. We've identified the research plots that would be used if this grant's funded in the county parks, sort of a 1/4 square mile blocks to do this research. So we're hopeful about that. And then we have a couple of other ideas that we're looking into. So we're very aware of this issue and sort of the need for more options and sort of area-wide control. So in terms of the reports that we get to the lab, the majority of requests that we get are identification requests of the palm weevil in the Canary Island date palms. Occasionally we get requests for specimens or information for educational use. And the main concerns that we hear from people are related to the disposal methods, like the people don't want to squash the weevil or put it in their freezer, but how do I get rid of it without spreading it to my neighbors? How do I protect my other palm trees in the area? Sort of concerns about the difficulty of the treatment, how do I get rid of this palm that's already dead? The cost that the tree is a hazard, like a falling hazard or a fire risk. Customers want to know which palm species are at risk. And a lot of people are just grieving the lot. By the time they're calling us, the symptoms are pretty bad. It's the palm's dead. And so sort of grieving the loss of their old palm that they feel has some sentimental value. And these are sort of iconic trees, often it's people's grandparents that planted them. And so those are the concerns that we hear. In terms of unusual reports that we've investigated recently, I'm going to talk about the Guadalupe palm and the San Diego Zoo samples. We get a lot of samples that aren't South American palm weevil. So often people know that, but they want to know what is it though? So the Palo Verde beetle that's in this photograph is one of the main submissions we get. And working through other just the palm symptoms, sometimes it's other things oh, it's under electrical wires, was it maybe it's been the branches or the fronds have been cut by those or things like that. So in the last couple of weeks we've had 2 reports from Guadalupe palm. One of them was turned in a photograph to email of the weevil. And another one was pretty interesting. It was a report from someone's neighbor who went through the CDFA exotic pest hotline. And then a beetle had attacked this palm and it came to us to investigate. And the entire crown had fallen off the palm while it was still green. I have a photo. So by the time we got there, the picture in the middle, the palm had been completely removed, but the homeowner had kept a specimen of the larva. So apparently they had trimmed the base of the fronds and hadn't noticed any issues. And then gone away for a few weeks, came back, and the entire crown had just fallen off, still green. So this photo on the left is from Google, the Google Earth imagery. So they weren't sure of the identity of the palm. We think it was a Guadalupe palm. If anyone is better at identifying palms, we'd like to hear if it's something else. So we were able to take the specimen, send it to the state lab. They identified it as a South American palm weevil. So that was good that it's not like some new pest that had destroyed the palm. It sounded pretty catastrophic, like the whole thing just falling down, still green without much warning. They said it was full of larvae, no adults yet. But yeah, it's one of the recently identified new hosts. And interestingly, in this area, like in the neighborhood, we could see a Canary Island date palm that still looks fine. There were quite a few in the area. The residence was right near the Tecolote Canyon, which has quite a few dead palms. I don't think they're the Guadalupe palm though. They're another fan palm. I don't know if that's, we're just speculating. Maybe the weevil came up through there. I don't know. But that was an interesting report we received recently. We received another couple of samples recently from the San Diego Zoo that they have traps set up in some of their locations, and they'd found 4 weevils with a red stripe on the body. It didn't really show up in this photo. I don't know if you can see my pointer, but just on the side of the body, there was sort of a dark red stripe. I know there are some of the weevils have like a red sort of red stripe that makes them easily confused with the red palm weevil. These were slightly smaller, but just in case, we sent them for identification with the state, and they're the South American palm weevil. So just a smaller reddish morph. And then another common one that we have submitted is the cactus weevil that is smaller, and like, oh no, is it attacking this like cacti now? But this is the cactus weevil. Okay, so they're the main sort of samples that we've seen recently, and interesting samples we get through the lab for identification. And then I just wanted to lastly mention our beekeeping apiary program. We do apiary inspections, bee health checks, public safety for pest and disease monitoring for managed honeybee hives. And the place that the South American palm weevil interacts with this program is that if you're applying a pesticide that's labeled toxic for bees to a flowering plant and you're a commercial applicator, then you would contact us to do a bee check, which is where we check if there's any registered beekeepers who have asked to be notified of pesticide sprays. You have to let them know 48 hours before the spray, or like work with them like, oh, can we do it like in the night so the bees aren't there, so that the bees don't get poisoned when they're visiting the flowering plants. So that all comes through our office. You can call that into us and we'll let you know the contact information of the beekeepers. So that's all for me. We talked about what the county entomology lab does. If you have samples that you want identified for suspect invasive species or industry samples, you can contact us. And let's all keep hopeful for our grant applications for the area-wide treatment research. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that talk. Let's look over at the questions, and I believe there's just one right now. Is there a quarantine on palm trees in San Diego County?
No, not that I'm aware of. Anything that's being shipped would be inspected by our nursery program, but there's no current quarantine that I'm aware of.
Okay, Vidal, thank you so much for that talk. We really
Great, thank you.
Here.
I'll hang around as well in case any questions for me come up later.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So moving on to our next speaker. His name is Seth Byronbaum. Let's see if I said that correctly, Seth.
Close enough.
Close enough. Awesome. He is from Orange County Agriculture Commission, and he will be giving us an update about the history of the red palm weevil that was found in Laguna Beach. The floor is yours.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to try and share my screen.
There it is.
All right. Sorry, it started at the end of mine. So good morning. I'm Seth Birnbaum. I'm the Deputy Agriculture Commissioner here in Orange County. I run our agricultural services programs. I really do like following Dr. Hodel and everybody from yesterday, and of course, Dr. Cass from San Diego, because they basically gave my presentations. We share the same services that San Diego County does. Each county runs its own departments throughout the state, enforcing laws and regulations set forth by the California Food and Agricultural Code, California Department of Food and Agriculture, California Department of Pesticide Regulation, Business Professions Code. So it's basically, we're providing citizens, and we have the responsibility of enforcing state mandated agricultural and pesticide regulations and certification of commercial weighing and measuring devices. My office, I'm the Agricultural Services, so we focus on the preventing of exotic plant pests and diseases. Programs including our high-risk pest exclusion program, which we have inspectors in all of our terminals. What people don't know is that inspectors are out every day in our terminals, which are UPS, FedEx, OnTrack, other terminals that shipping of plants move throughout the county and into the state. I have 15 people on a regular basis, Monday through Friday, and sometimes Saturdays and Sundays, depending on the load, inspecting plant material as it ships from online retailers, nurseries throughout the country, and also having large shipments coming into the county inspected at our nurseries as well. My office runs our Certified Farmers Markets, Organics, and Certified Producers program. Our bulk citrus, which is our Wong Bing and ACP regulation quarantine program, which we work with the state. One of the things that Orange County differs from a lot of the counties in the 58 counties throughout the state of California is that we do not have a trapping program. We actually contract with CDFA, California Department of Food and Agriculture, to do all of the pest trapping and monitoring throughout Orange County. They mainly do trapping for exotic pests, fruit flies, Japanese beetle, Asian citrusillid, gypsy moth, and now spotted lanternfly. The luckily part of it, we have no reports or finds of South American palm weevil in Orange County. We definitely like to keep it that way. We are not actively trapping or monitoring for the pest. So it is based on fines by industry and homeowners and bringing it in. Just like San Diego County, we offer identification and, services, and you can bring in pest samples, drop off. Depending on the pest find, we'll send out inspectors to try and get an official sample if needed. Usually it's requested by CDFA to get those official samples. So we are definitely looking for any type of services. So basically, if anybody's bringing in samples and they have a suspect pest, they can bring it into our office. We'll ship it up to CDFA for official analysis and get you identification methods through that. So it's the same thing San Diego offers, except we just do not have an entomologist on staff anymore. We no longer have an entomologist or a plant pathologist. So all of our regulatory samples and walk-ins and industry samples get sent up to CDFA's lab in Sacramento. But as we were discussing earlier, we did have back in 2010 red palm weevil find in Laguna Beach. It started with an arborist finding the red palm weevil in August of 2010. It did take them almost a full month to bring it into our office. And that suspect adult and larva was sent from our office to, was identified at our time by Dr. Nissen, who was our entomologist on staff at the time. He then sent it up to CDFA for official confirmation. And as you can see, it also went to USDA. One of the, this pest was officially identified as the Rhynchophorus vulneratus red palm weevil, which is found in the native to South Thailand and northern Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia. This was found in Laguna Beach. As it was discussed, I'm not going to go through the whole trapping and delimitation that Mohammed and went through yesterday, but through the efforts and through its unique geographic location right next to the water, it had it's right next to a canyon too, so it had a very small host material range in this neighborhood. They were able to eradicate it. It came down to January of 20th of 2015, USDA, APHIS, and CDFA declared it eradicated because they had 3 consecutive years with no pest detections finds. And the estimated cost of this eradication was over $1 million. So extremely expensive. And as everybody's learning, that the South American palm weevil is extremely expensive to maintain and try and manage. We definitely want to try and keep this out of Orange County as possible. All the other counties limit the spread. Love to, excuse me, to get this, the notification that it's been eradicated and have a nice letter from UCR go out, just like the red palm weevil for Orange County find in Laguna Beach. So I definitely want you all to know that anytime anybody that's working in Orange County, working in homeowners, working on commercial properties, if you are trapping for the pest and you find anything, first and foremost, please contact Dr. Hoddle, give your information. You can also get the pest identified through our office and drop it off. My contact information and our office information is here. We're located in Orange, pretty centrally located throughout the whole county. We have a satellite campus. We're part of Public Works. So you would see us on our Public Works campus. We are here Monday through Friday. You can drop off samples at our office at the location. There's forms you can find for sample identification on our website. And my contact information is at the bottom. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take those. But yeah, we have similar services to what San Diego has.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Seth, for that update to see where we're at from our neighbor's standpoint on that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is going to be Dr. Thomas Paring. He is from UCR, Department of Entomology, and he will be talking about how the South American palm weevil is basically almost starting to change the date industry and how we look for pests, because this is a little scary if this pest does get into Riverside County. He will be giving us an update. Tom.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you're doing well, and share my screen here. All right, so we are going to switch gears a little bit now, and I've appreciated the last 2 days of presentations. I'm very happy that this palm weevil decided to take up its first place in the California in San Diego, not in the desert with dates, because there's a lot of great information that's coming out that we're going to be able to use in dates. So we're going to switch from the jungles of the urban area to the jungles of the agricultural area. And Date palms is about 11,000 acre industry out in the Coachella Valley. Another 3 to 4,000 out in down in the Bard Winter Haven area and in Arizona, and a few hundred acres out in Blythe. So it's a growing industry, and that's growing mostly because of the commercialization and the improvements in organic agriculture, specifically with the medjool variety of dates. So if you haven't had your date today, you should be going out and buying some and having them. Well, this is our beast of the day that we've been talking about so much, and you guys have heard a lot about it, so I'm not going to rehash stuff that Mark Hoddle and others have talked about here. It's really specific on Canary Island date palms. There's other date palms that it also will attack. We're just concerned about it out in the Coachella Valley with our Phoenix date palms. It also was reported in San Diego in 2010, 2011, depends on who you talk to, and moving north at an alarming rate. As far as its movement to the east, we had a collection in Calexico in 2011 and 12. Mohammed Azubaidi talked about this yesterday in his presentations. There was a report in 2012 from USDA in Texas, and then in 2015 in Arizona, there was a dead beetle that was found near a palm weevil trap. So again, no established records out in any of the date ranches that I'm aware of that have been reported in the literature, but that doesn't stop us from being very concerned about this insect, because if it does get into the industry, then it could have some devastating effects. You've been hearing a lot about the management, some fantastic folks that are working on this. It's difficult and costly to remove the palms and cut them up and chip them and grind them. Pesticides can be effective. And I also was just talking about these contact and systemic materials, sprays of the contact materials of imidacloprid and dinotefuran in the crown, followed by every 3 months applications of soil applications. This is great information for us because the more we know about how these pesticides will work in palms in general, the better we're going to be prepared in case it does become established in date palms and Coachella and Bard Winter Haven. So we got on the horn about this fairly early with our bucket traps and placed these around in date ranches. So we had 94 traps out from June of 2018 through January 2020 when COVID kind of shut us down. And in all that time, we didn't catch any beetles in any of the traps. We know from some of the more recent work in Mark Hoddle's lab with Milosevic, that there's a better mouse trap out there. And so we've started to use that this year in our trapping programs. I'll talk about that in just a little bit. So I could end the presentation right here and say we don't have this beetle in dates. That would cut short something that I think is very important in dates, and that we have another really big beetle. And I want to raise your awareness of this big beetle. It's called the giant palm borer. And this is actually a native insect to California. It was discovered in the late 1800s out in the Washingtonian oases out in the desert. And this beetle has an incredible size to it. It's actually larger than the South American palm weevil. And it's got a very interesting biology in that the way that it works is that the female beetles attack the crown of the plant, just like the South American palm weevil. She bores inside about 12 inches and she's got a gallery. She calls a male into the gallery, they mate, and she lays her eggs in the gallery and then she dies. Those eggs hatch, and anywhere from 3 to 8 years, the larvae bore down the trunk of these very tall palm trees. And depending on the temperature conditions, environmental conditions that are there, they will then pupate inside the trunk and then pop a hole out and emerge as adults. Again, 3 to 8 years later, and then that cycle starts again. Now, this happens very slow in nature in these oases, predominantly because these oases are areas where they get intermittent moisture. Sometimes you'll get floods, sometimes they're dry for years. And so that palm tree is growing very, very slow. And it gives an opportunity for that beetle to work its way down the trunk and to pop out then as an adult. Incredibly interesting biology about this. And that's important. I'll tell you that why that's important when we get to date palms. It's got a very large grub. The grubs don't feed up in the top of the crown like South American palm weevil and create this soupy, what did Mark call it, this soupy mass of goodness, or that he talked about. But they actually start boring down the palm. So you don't have the top of the crowns, they don't fall off like it does with the South American palm weevil. In fact, you don't even see this infestation occurring until these beetles pop out. And typically the infestations are fairly low. They're noticeable when you've got some heavy flights going on, as I'll talk about in a minute. Well, these trees might look familiar to you, those of you who work with the South American palm weevil, but they've just basically have died for lack of care and lack of water. And when the trees get like this, they become prime habitat for this very long development of the South American, of the giant palm borer. So this is what we watch out for in the desert. In 2014, there was a very large migration, an emergence of these in the month of June, May and June, 2014. And we identified 2 sites in the lower part of the Coachella Valley. So to orient you, this is the Salton Sea down here in the lower right-hand corner. And these are date palm ranches and other agricultural crops in this valley. We identified 2 ranches, or 2 spots, they weren't actually working ranches, that had these kinds of trees in them. And if you looked up close at the trunks of those trees, you can see all of these emergence holes from the giant palm borer. And once again, going back to those trees, those infestations, those larvae that popped out started in the top here, and they migrated all the way down that trunk for 3 to 8 years, a very, very long time. When they pop out, they emerged in very, very high numbers. And they inundated the valley. I want you to take a look at this tree that I cut the tree out, but I want you to look at all of these galleries that have gone down the heart of this tree, all the way down, and the larvae packed their galleries with frass. And so it's just really incredible, the numbers of beetles that can be produced in a tree that's been abandoned. Well, at that time, I did a lot. I've been working with the date industry for about 25 years. And so grabbed a ladder, went up in a tree and took my chainsaw up there and started cutting in to a place where, so this beetle had come in and she had gone down into this little hole here. And then she had started her boring down into the crown of the tree, kind of moving toward that meristematic tissue. So I got my chainsaw and I started cutting away the fronds. And the way palms grow is that the fronds and the fruiting branches, you have the meristematic, you have the heart of the palm, which is undifferentiated tissue. And then that, as a tree grows and grows, that undifferentiated tissue becomes different leaves and fronds, or fruiting branches if you're in a production crop. So over time, those branches and those fruiting branches and fronds, they will pop out the top, and the tree grows from the crown out like this. So the older leaves are on the outside of that. Well, you can see these layers in this picture. You can see the layers of those fronds now this is the hole. The beetle has come down and gone into the trunk now, gone into the heart of the palm. So this hole right here is where that beetle bored down. It only takes about 2 weeks for her to do this. Here we go down in there, and you can see the layers of the branches that have been pulled, that I've pulled away now. All of these were damaged by that hole of the female going through there. Well, what happens when those branches then finally make it out of the crown so that they're no longer supported, that hole that she has made is growing as well as the palm fronds grows, or the fruiting branch grows, and it becomes exposed, pardon me, and it creates these holes in the arms. The growers call them, they've got holes in the arms. Well, when those become exposed out there, when they start bearing the weight of the fruiting branch, they just snap. Or even a long branch of the fronds, it will just snap and it'll fall off. So there you get the economic damage. So I suspected that for several years until one day, one of Hadley's palmeros found a fruiting branch that actually had one of these beetles that had gotten stuck in there. And it stayed in there until that branch came out of center part of the crown. And there it is, the giant palm borer. And you can see the fruiting branch was damaged by her, but she didn't actually finally get all the way. Why she died in there, I don't know. So we could use that. So here's that branch that where I was just showing the close-ups. We can use that, and these broken branches, we can use that to mark the trees that got damaged in that 2014 flight. And so what we did is we took our 2 locations and we sampled all of the date palms in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 mile radii around those. And we found out that the ones that were closest to these sites were actually the heaviest infested. That's intuitive to think that, but now having that evidence, we were able to give that to the agricultural commissioner, who then could go to these sites, declare them as nuisance sites, and get the grower to clean them up. So this is what that site looks like today. So all of those sources for the beetles were wrapped up. Problem solved. No more problems with these broken branches in our date palms. This was in 2014, and 2015 there were a few growers that reported some branches broken. In 2016 and 2017. Well, remember that those branches are coming out from the inside of the crown, so you would expect to have damaged branches for 3-4 years maybe. We don't really know. But in 2021, the growers are complaining about a lot of broken branches. Now that's a long time. 7 years later, I don't think that we were having the same problem or from that 2014 infestation. So it jogged me to get my butt in gear and to get down and take a look at some of these ranches. And so there were a lot of broken fruiting branches and all this stuff. So I'm going to show you one site that I found. So here's a grower, and these green areas depict these working date ranches. And I drove around these ranches looking for places that would have these abandoned and dying palms. And turns out there's a spot right here, very, very close to both of these ranches. Here it's just across the road. Here it's 1 block away. And so I went to that site, and here's what I found. These again is an abandoned date ranch, very, very tall trees. Long time ability for these beetles to infest, and sure behold, the fallen palm trees from here have exit holes from the giant palm borer. So we have an existing problem throughout the valley, in that these kinds of abandoned places are scattered throughout the valley. And if they got infested with giant palm borer any time in the last, since 2014 to the present, then they could be turning out beetles that are again attacking trees and causing this recurring infestation. So I've turned this information over to the Ag Commissioner again, and we're doing some investigative work with them, and hopefully be able to abate some of these other problem areas so that we can get rid of this issue with the giant palm borer. Now we'll pivot back to our insect du jour. So this is these are the relative size difference between the South American palm weevil and the giant palm borer. And you can see they're very different. South American palm weevil is a little bit smaller. South American palm weevil's got this snout out here. Now, giant palm borer doesn't have a snout. It's got a different kind of a mouthpart structure here. Now I bring this up because if you're living in the desert, or some of these other beetles that you've been turning into, people that turn into the agricultural commissioner's offices, this giant palm borer is not likely one you're going to see, because there are not very many unmanaged palm oases in the urban areas. But I bring this up because it's important that if you do see South American palm weevil, that you let us know about it, because this more eyes that we have, as Mark talked to citizen scientists out there, help give us more eyes in the field. Well, as I mentioned earlier, we started with the bucket traps. This paper came out in 2020 out of Mark Otto's lab with Ivan Milosevic, and basically identified that the bucket traps captured about 18% of the beetles that came in. They would crawl back out, and the Pokusin trap trapped about 89%. So we've gone to using the Pokusin traps, and so I've instituted what I call the date palm defense for the South American palm weevil. And one of the things I want to mention before I forget about that is that there is a quarantine for Phoenix palms moving into the Coachella Valley, into Riverside County. So there's been a couple of questions about, are there quarantines of palms in San Diego County, Orange County? And while they're not there, you cannot bring a Phoenix palm into Coachella Valley. So that's a good line of defense, since the Canariensis, of course, is the Phoenix species. So that's good. It's good to have. So we're not going to be inadvertently, at least moving legally, we're not going to be moving Phoenix palms from San Diego County or any of the other counties into the Coachella Valley, into Riverside County. So we're monitoring these. We're using papoose traps and bucket traps. This is one of our traps that we placed out in the field. Another one at a different site. Of course, we label them so they don't disturb, and give us a holler if you have any questions about what we're doing here. As Mark mentioned, these traps have baker's yeast in a bucket of dates that makes it a nice smelly date mess. And we have a pheromone, aggregation pheromone, attractant pheromone in the trap that we put with an accelerant. And that brings the beetles in, they crawl up these traps and get caught. We're focusing our traps not so much near date palms. The original trapping that we did was in date palms, based on some of what Mark's recommendations were, that can attract beetles to trees, and we certainly don't want to do that. So we've backed off on that, and we're focusing near what we would think would be centers of introduction. And these would be things like nurseries. So a nursery might ship in some potted trees from a nursery in San Diego. They're not Phoenix, but adult beetle might get down into the foliage of that, could be shipped into the valley. So we wanted to trap around nursery areas, and these traps are very attractant. So if there was an adult beetle, they're going to get attracted to our traps around these nurseries. We have stayed with some of the date ranches, especially on some of the highways and places where these beetles may have hitched a ride and on a truck. Golf courses have a lot of Canariensis palms, Canary Island date palms, and then retailers who sell these things. So we have 74 traps out in the valley here. Again, our retailers, Lowe's, Home Depot, places that bring in plant material. And we want to make sure, again, we're hitting these areas of introduction as much as we can. We have date growers out there that are in their fields every day. They're watching. One thing about South American palm weevil is that if it gets into the palms and starts an infestation, it's pretty easy to see it, because the top of that palm becomes really bad. And these palmeros are up in the date palm 7-8 times a year. So we have a lot of eyes in the field, and we're very hooked into the date industry to let us know if they have any issues. And I get calls of diseased trees that the tops die on them. And every time I've gone out there, it's been a disease, not the date palm. And that's been going on since South American palm weevil, actually since red palm weevil showed up down in San Diego 2017. So every time I get a call like that, I'll go out to the field and take my chainsaw, cut it up, and make sure that there's no palm weevils in the trees. We're focusing on these nurseries that we do have some Canary Island palm nurseries in the valley that are growing for residents in the valley and for nurseries in the valley and for retail areas in the valley. We're very intent on monitoring those. This is one of those Canary Island date ranches, and we have traps around this ranch. We visually search all the palms for the signs. As I was mentioned, our palmeros and our date ranchers are out there. If we find it, if we find an infested palm, destruction is not going to be a problem. So where you've got the problems where there are problems in the urban areas about dropping these very, very, very tall trees, because of they're in the urban area, they could fall on houses, they're falling on cars. That won't be a problem for us, and any date rancher would not gladly, but if they had an infestation like that, and this has happened historically, this has happened with other date palm pests. We've had infestations, the growers will just burn the trees, take the trees down, burn them, and that's it. We have about 50 trees per acre on average in date palms, and dropping them, pardon me, dropping these trees and grinding them up, getting rid of them, that won't be an issue for us in the valley. Then Of course, around those trees, we would, if we found an infested tree or an infested trap, we're going to inundate the area with more traps to make sure that hopefully it was just a single introduction. If we catch more, that's more indicative that the beetles could be coming from infestations in the area. If we do find that they become established, then we enter into a pest management. So that's first line is just palm defense and eradication. If they do get into the valley, we go into a pest management process, and we're paying very close attention to the insecticide studies that are being done. And there are some tools already that have been determined that are effective, crown treatments with dinotefuran and imidacloprid, soil drenching after that. So I can't work on insecticide efficacy in the desert because we don't have palm weevils, South American palm weevil there, and I'm certainly not going to bring them in to do a study. So again, it's good to be able to have knowledge that's coming from the urban areas where there is such a problem, and there's really some good studies coming out from Rainbow Tree Care and some of the other folks that are working on this. Applications in date palms is not new to the date farmers. They spray. They've sprayed conventionally for years in these tall palms, so they have the equipment to do that. Again, we don't have to worry about overspray on people's houses because there is urbanization that is coming up against our agricultural areas, but within the date ranch, again, the farmers are very good at doing this and spraying at the times we don't get drift and those sorts of things. I've also been working with a fellow on developing some technologies for monitoring and application using drones. So we've got a couple of years of really interesting information about this. This particular shot is a prototype of a payload that would release predators. And we're using this actually for some spider mite research that I've been involved with for years. And so the drone technology, we're working towards that. And so it may be possible that if we were to need to spray for South American palm weevil, I'm not sure we can get enough material up in the ground. Probably would use ground treatments for that, but certainly for monitoring, you may be able to fly over larger acreages of date palms, if in fact this became a management issue. Just a picture of the drone flying over our date ranches. And then Mark mentioned yesterday, toward the end of his talk, about this attract and kill technology. Somebody else talked about that through the seminar series. This is Isca Technologies in Riverside. Agenor Mafraneto is the president and CEO of that company. And we worked with Agenor and his company to develop a pheromone-based technology for mating disruption for another insect. And through about 10 years of development, developed this caulking gun methodology where you take the pheromone, you mix it in this kind of toothpaste matrix, consistency matrix, put it in a caulking gun, and you can actually deliver that right to the date palm. It puts out what we call a dollop, and that dollop slowly radiates out the pheromone and releases the pheromone. For the carib moth anyway, we get about one application per year. Will do it for us, and we treat up on the top of the tree, and we treat at about eye height on the base of the tree, and this gives us good disruption for the carib moth. I would like to mention that growers have actually utilized this technology. It's now been registered for organic production. It's called Splat EC. And growers have developed pneumatic applicators for putting dollops at the tops of these very tall trees, 40, 50-foot trees. And so that technology exists. And if, as we move to this attract and kill technology and into that study, it might be worthwhile. I know you're working with Isca Tech, but for all the scientists that are working on this, there's application technologies out there for getting these dollops high up into the tree. So that's another good tool. As far as our outreach is concerned, we want to get this into the eyes of homeowners out there. Now, these pictures I've stolen from Mark's outreach literature on the CSIR website. these pictures, of course, were taken in San Diego, and you know the chewed up leaves here, the tops of the fronds. So we're distributing these throughout the Coachella Valley, and or if you see this insect, you know, give us a call. Here's the number there, and I always in my presentations, like many of you that have been speaking, with my contact information, so you can get a hold of me. And again, the more eyes we have out in the urban areas and in the agricultural areas, the better we can keep track of this and try to keep it out of the Coachella Valley. So that's the end of my presentation. I'll leave it there and answer any questions that you might have.
Yes, there are several. So the first one is, how many known species does the palm borer affect?
Giant palm borer, that's a really good question. And I would think it would go to I think it would go to pretty much any palm, because it's Washingtonian palms is where it's from. It's in the Phoenix palms. It'll go to any palm and it'll attack them. And if that tree is not being managed, then it will basically continue its biology and go down. If it's managed, and what happens when the trees are well watered, which most of the trees in urban area are, they're taken care of. Now, if you get it in sweet water in places like that, if there's plenty of water there, that's not going to be. But the deal is that, remember I talked about that gallery that's going into the heart of the palm? If that plant is managed, those branches and palms, they're growing at a pretty fast rate, and basically it will push the larvae right out of the top of the crown so that the larvae cannot survive. And again, they're not just going to feed us in a big mass up in the crown. So so to answer the question, I think that any palm tree that's in a ignored or area where they're not getting water, and you're basically letting the palm tree die, I think they would probably be attacked by the giant palm borer.
Okay, thank you. Next question. How far north has the giant palm borer been found?
You know, I've heard reports that there's up in Death Valley, there's been some collections of giant palm borer, but it's not very common.
Okay.
Thomas, this is Bodil. Just to follow up on that, what did you say the overall distribution is of the giant palm borer?
I think it's distributed. I think the major distribution is primarily in the Coachella Valley.
Okay. Would we
Yeah.
find it in San Diego?
Not likely.
Okay.
Not likely, but it's something to keep in mind. Something to have out there to keep in mind. Again, it's a pretty unmistakable beetle.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
So I don't think you'll see it out there. There might be, again, some areas that are fringe, that are not, you know, that don't get water. Let's say sweet water that's on the outside of the reserve there that's not being managed. You might pick it up, but in all this time, and there's been a lot of people looking at palms, is you guys have never seen it out there. So I think it's going to be pretty rare if you do find it.
Thank you.
Okay. Somebody asked, okay, this might have been in one of your previous slides, but it says, what is the organic treatment? I'm not sure what that question pertains to.
Well, so yeah, I'm just talking about, you know, conventional agriculture is where the farmers use pesticides, and organic agriculture, they're growing for organic markets. And so they can't use synthetic pesticides in those fields. So it's just the organic conventional reference.
Okay. What are the management options for giant palm borer?
Well, the management options are to keep your trees well watered, and then to be really aware of the areas around your date ranch. And if you have some of these abandoned properties where there's old date palms that are growing, that's where you're going to produce the beetles. Now, if the beetle does attack your date palm, and they'll bore right down into the top of it, then you're going to experience some of these broken arms and broken fruiting branches. But the key to that is finding out where the infestation is coming from. There's no sprays for it. This being a fruit crop, we don't have, or a food crop, we don't have very many pesticides that we can use. Certainly imidacloprid and dinotefuran and these others are not approved for use in date palms. We're working on that in case something like South American palm weevil comes in. Right now, we don't really have anything that you could treat with, even to give you any kind of protection against this. So best line of defense is just be aware of what's around you. Talk to those folks who have those particular abandoned areas, cut them down, get them out, and then that should stop the infestation.
Okay, thank you. I think that is it. I think those are the questions, Tom. You answered them all.
Okay, it's nice seeing you, everybody. And if you do see anything that looks like this South American palm weevil, especially if you're in the lower desert or in any date ranch areas, yeah, make sure you give us a holler with my information up there on the screen.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Tom. Have a good day.
You too.
Okay. So, Tom Perrin was our last speaker for today for our second event. Just some closing remarks. Thank you so much to all the speakers for their time putting those presentations together and giving those presentations. Thank you for those who have joined us today. I don't know if Cheryl wants to take over.
All right, so thank you, everybody. Please email me if there are any questions that might come up. And I hope everybody has a good rest of the day.